I'd like to give comment on two topics today. First of all, the statement that Minister Solomon made about OpenAI, as well as the CBC story on Minister Diab today. I'll start with the OpenAI comments. I am very concerned about the government's capacity and willingness to address artificial intelligence policy writ large. I've been talking about this issue for 3 years. I started talking about it almost immediately after the release of ChatGPT in late 2022, and started raising even just basic concerns like the fact that we still, 3 years later, don't have a law in place to prevent intimate images that have been created with artificial intelligence from being distributed in non-consensual ways. I put a bill in place on that several years ago now, and I am concerned about the government's pace on addressing this issue. I certainly don't see it as a front burner issue, but I think if you read the media, you can see that there's a story every day. Even things I've written about, for example, whether or not Canada's immigration policy and immigration levels are taking into consideration potential disruptions that artificial intelligence is going to have, or is predicted to have, in certain job sectors. So today I'm definitely calling upon the government to take this issue a little bit more seriously, to be less reactive, and to restate that Conservatives are willing to collaborate with the government on smart policy. And certainly discussions about the topic, at least. A couple of years ago, I started the Parliamentary Caucus on Emerging Technology to educate colleagues across political stripes so that we could go back to our caucuses with a base level of understanding of the technology and some of the both opportunities and challenges that it creates. But certainly I think that events are outpacing the government's both willingness and capacity to address the issue. So just reiterating calls for the government to get on that today. And then also, with regard to the CBC story on Minister Diab, look, we have seen Canada's immigration consensus crumble over the last year. I am deeply concerned about the hardening attitudes of Canadians towards immigration. This is why I and my Conservative colleagues have been putting forward common sense proposals to restore order and fairness back into the system. The problem is that, whenever we have the minister at committee or she's in the House of Commons, she doesn't exude confidence in the file. I think that the fact that 10 Liberal MPs were willing to talk to the CBC about and issue similar sentiments probably states something that we all knew was going to happen, which is I think that the Prime Minister is going to have to fire her, and fire her quickly. This file is too important to continue on the path that she's set it on. Certainly, I'll reiterate something I said yesterday. I do feel like she's been put in a situation where she's had to clean up the mess of other men, one of whom has been failed upward into cabinet, into the justice file. But the fact remains that she has not shown a great degree of competency over the last year. On that note, once that is done, I want to reiterate that Conservatives are willing to work collaboratively with the government. I've put a lot of time over the last year or so in developing concrete policy options that I hope that the Liberals will just steal and implement. Because, again, when you think about Canada's pluralism, our ability to match immigration levels to housing, healthcare and jobs, maintain Canada's immigration consensus, without somebody who's strong on the file, is willing to work collaboratively and from a place of knowledge, we're not going to see progress on this. Thank you.
Mark Miller told me that he's looking to work with you on the online harms bill to try to get this passed through Parliament quickly. Has the government reached out to you or your caucus at all? And where do you see your approach differing from what the government's proposed?
So Mr. Miller has not reached out to me. I put forward my bill basically to give the Liberals a roadmap, and I've tabled it twice now. Where our approach differs from the Liberals is that we don't believe as Conservatives that Canadians should have to sacrifice their civil liberties, particularly on speech, in order to be safe anywhere, including online. So this is why my bill has several components: the deepfake component that I talked about earlier, an online duty of care for online operators, which is a very big term, which would allow for the law to keep pace with technological changes, which happen every day. as well as more tools for law enforcement and for victims who are victims of online harassment and stalking. So again, like where our approach differs, and I think where the Liberals have been extremely, I think, off base on this, is that they believe in every bill that they've put forward that that Canadians should be asked to sacrifice their civil liberties, their freedom of speech, in order to be safe online. We've put forward an alternative that we could pass today and get those protections in place. I know, I have to be in the House very quickly.
Motion. So the government keeps saying that it is false that failed asylum seekers can still access health care. You keep saying they do. Which is which, and why do you say that?
Well, they do. They are, like, if they didn't, why wouldn't they just support the motion? They do. There's at least the order paper question I stated in my remarks yesterday, there's at least 85,000 in the data that we have that haven't failed asylum claimants that haven't been removed from Canada. We believe that in order to restore fairness and compassion in the system, that those persons should have their care limited to emergency life-saving care only. I do have a statement in the House.
Hello, I'm Leah Gazan, and I'm the proud member of Parliament for Winnipeg Centre. Right now in Ottawa, Indigenous women and 2S LGBTQIA+ are meeting with government officials about how to develop safer communities around resource extraction projects. We know from studies that were done in the status of women in the last Parliament that there is an increase of violence against Indigenous women and girls around man camps. We know that coming out of a study that we did in the last Parliament that all parties agreed unanimously, something that rarely happens in the House of Commons, to support our study to push for corporate accountability and corporate responsibility when they bring workers into Indigenous communities that often result in violence against Indigenous women and girls. Yet, this government pushed through Bill C-5 with the absence of the voices of Indigenous women. This government is now trying to implement projects of national interest without putting in place community safety plans. So at the same time, this government has cut all of its funding, specific funding geared for murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls in this country. It is clear that this is a non-issue for this government, yet we know rates of violence are increasing rapidly since the pandemic. And yet, the supports that are given to gender-based violence, particularly in my riding of Winnipeg Centre, which has been identified as ground zero for MMIWG, where's the funding? Where's the funding to save lives? Where's the funding for evacuees that are currently from Pimicikamak, Cree Nation? Where is the funding for evacuees who are being evacuated into Winnipeg Centre as a result of increasing climate emergency events as a result to the climate as a result of the climate emergency? No support. What does this mean? It means that evacuees are left vulnerable to predators who prey around hotel rooms. And what does it mean for Indigenous communities? It means that Indigenous women and girls' safety is left up to the discretion of the corporations who, by all records, have a poor history with ensuring the safety of women, Indigenous women and girls around resource extraction projects. So I will be asking the government a question in regards to this matter today.
Your colleague Alexandre Boulerice is thinking about running in the provincial riding. What does it make you feel to know that you might lose a colleague?
Well, you know what? It's been an absolute pleasure working with my colleague Alexandre Boulerice over the past few years. That's up to him to answer. All I have to say is that I support whatever decision he makes, and it's been an absolute honor to have the opportunity to work with such a strong member from Quebec.
Does it say anything about the state of your party at this point?
Well, you know what? It's no secret that we had a very difficult election again. You know, that's up to Monsieur Boulerice to answer. But in saying that, you know, this is a hard life, traveling back and forth, and I wish whatever decision he makes is good for both him and his family. I will support that.
Can I just ask you a more broader question about First Nations Indigenous funding from this government in general? We've had, specifically on the Urban Indigenous Programming Fund stream, we have Ontario Friendship Centres, and I'm sure across different provinces, having their funding cut by nearly half, I think even more than half in some places. They have made, they might be making announcements on Jordan's Principle. Just where do you see this funding and the fact that a lot of these programs are still waiting right up until their deadline in March before they'll get any news about if they're getting extended their funding?
Well, it demonstrates how reconciliation is certainly not a priority for this government. Let's not forget the whole economy. They're relying on Indigenous lands, territories, and resources to build the Canadian economy. With a bill, first of all, that violated their constitutional obligation, even in the drafting of the bill, to obtain free, prior, and informed consent, particularly from modern treaty rights holders. And then, not on top of all of that, they've cut back on funding. They've cut back on saving funding that's required in urban centres to keep people alive. All the funding cutbacks that we are feeling in Winnipeg Centre from this so-called conservative government in disguise results in the loss of life. These are life-saving supports. There is no room for cuts, particularly around Indigenous services that has always been grossly underfunded. Thank you.